There we go. Anybody here this morning? I hope. I that. Let's present slides. Oop, class time. Hmm. So, anybody out there? Anyway, good morning. Just getting stuff from yesterday. Ah, good. Okay, a whole bunch of you saying good morning. Good. Glad you're there. Um, this is actually yesterday morning, not this morning, but this morning it was almost the same as this. Back in Halifax this week, they I live on a very steep hill that's in Armdale, and Armdale is just outside of the main part of Halifax. It's historically a relatively poor community, but it's getting gentrified now. We've lived here for a very, very long time, and uh, the hill is so steep that even the snowplows are afraid to drive on it during the winter time because they have accidents when they do. But it's a neat view because we can see out over the city from my front porch. This is actually just out in the road. This was yesterday morning as Dora and I were coming back from our walk around 8 o'clock or so. And if you know Halifax, it was yesterday's quite foggy. This morning it was much the same. The picture is a little bit different this morning if I'd taken it. Um, this shows the buildings in the distance are along Roby Street or in that area close to it, and the intersection of Roby and Quinpool. And currently, there are two big construction projects of one on Quinpool, one on Roby, and you can see the cranes that are there. There's actually two cranes on the right. One of them is trying to disassemble the other crane. And if you looked at it today, you would find that the big crane the crane on the far right is gone. That they've got it almost all taken apart. I always wanted to watch that close up of how they put these big cranes up and take them down again. And what isn't clear in the picture, but is probably about here, is there is a high rise that they're in the process of demolishing and taking down, and we'll see a new crane popping up there. Um, but it's interesting to watch the development across Halifax. Almost anything that's not in the downtown, because that's down a hill and we can't see it. We can see all the way across the city. Lots of fun. Always nice to have something to look at, just like watching the ocean. So anyway, today we've got interesting stuff to do. Last time we did simple summaries. Um, what's high, what's low, what's the middle, some debate about what's the best thing to use for the middle. Most people use the mean. We're going to be using that today. And percentiles and quartiles are sometimes nice things, at least if you know what they are. But unfortunately, it's hard to explain. And often your audience doesn't misinterprets what you're saying. So that's rather unfortunate. Um, but uh, so we often keep away from technical language. Um, this is a recurring theme with me through the course, communicating your results. I've had a lot of um, problems, lack of success, put it that way, in communicating how data should be informing decisions because of the ability of my audience to understand data and some of the language. And I don't think that's radically going to change over time. So you have to constantly think about almost pitching your results to an audience that is not very well educated. They may be smart, but they may not be well educated about data. Also mention this term standard deviation. Generally don't talk about it. Nobody understands it, but it will be used implicitly in some of the analysis you do. Whoa, excuse me, let's get rid of this. So today, my list doesn't look very long. This is going to be an Excel class for sure, and it's on pivot tables. It's chapter 4. I sent an email out to you just a little while ago. If you look at the end of chapter 4, there's only 7 questions I've got there. It's just hard to ask a lot of multiple choice Excel questions, and chapter 4 is heavily an Excel chapter. There are a variety of other types of issues that are implicitly covered, but they're hard to describe in uh, in multiple choice questions. I'm struggling to make up your test too, because it's going to have to cover this stuff. Let's get into it though. So the histograms and descriptive stats, they don't support filters. If you filter your data, it doesn't do any good. To analyze things, you have to do a lot of cutting and pasting. There's a lot of work that's involved. But an Excel pivot table or a pivot chart, we'll get the pivot charts at the very end and we'll use them a lot in the next class, are really, really good for analyzing patterns in your data and studying things like averages and a lot of the stuff we did before. It's generally not taught in a statistics course. They like to do the stuff we did in the previous classes in chapter 3. But in practice, if you're trying to communicate stuff to an audience, they're going to pivot tables and charts are far, far more effective, and you can do a lot more with them. So what do? So I'm going to try to flip back and forth between my slides again and Excel, but I'm going to take the data set we had last time, and I'm going to create a pivot table, and then I'm going to do some stuff with it. So once again, let me go back. I'm going to look at the data. I think this is the data set we had previously. This is from day 6, yeah, with the descriptive stats and histograms. And here's my data set in my data table. I'm going to go up here to insert. This is where we created the table. It's now ghosted out because I'm in a table. And I'm going to pick pivot table. Now you'll see select a table or range, and it's given me table 1. If your data is not in a table, it would probably say something like A1 up to Q or some letter 812. It'll give me the dimensions of the table, just like in the table function. By the way, those of you doing the assignment, if you're finding Excel is performing very, very slowly, or some things are not working in the table, it may be that when you created your table, it selected everything, every possible column and row, especially every possible row. And if it did that, it's created such a massive table, it works really, really slowly, especially when you started doing VLOOKUP. It started just grinding to a halt. You may have to go back and recreate your table, delete your old one, and with your table, make sure up in here it gives the dimensions from A1 up to some column and row 812. Otherwise, you're going to find it does a lot of work. And I want this in a new worksheet, always in a new worksheet. Okay, so what have I got here? Let me make this bigger. And unfortunately, oh, not that big. The only thing that gets bigger is the spreadsheet, not the stuff that's over on the right. The stuff on the right is really important. These are a bunch of very useful tools to us. So these are all of the variables that I've got, from ID all the way down to these other sorts of things that I've created. Okay. I can do filtering like I can in a table, but it's not going to be as quite the same as we had in a table. The filters aren't quite as powerful. I'm going to create a table. A table has rows and columns. So this is going to be where I'm going to put rows. This is where I'm going to put what I want as columns. And in the table, I'm going to summarize something like average salary. And so I'll put that stuff in the values group. So let's go and start building that sort of thing here. Let me just make sure I'm in sync with my slides. Okay. So as I explained what those different things are, and I'm going to go and put program in the rows. So let me go back to Excel. And I should probably make this small enough that I can see anything in chat. Oh dear, I keep getting this. This is junk email messages. Okay, so here's program. I'm going to grab it, hold it, drag it down, drop it in rows. So now you see arts, business, engineering, other, science, not applicable. And that's making up, okay, what's in my chart here. Those are the rows. So remember before we looked at averages for arts or business or engineering, other science, and then we also looked at males and females. Well, let's do that all at once. We'll go down and we'll take gender, put it into columns. So with gender, I've got female, male, and blanks that are sitting here. And I want to look at their salaries. Look at this. So where are we? Their salary. If I got a lot of variables, it gets hard to find them in the list. So, whoa, this isn't what I want. I want to know average salary. You'll notice down in the values in the bottom right corner, it says sum of salary. So it tells me how it's summarizing salary. And that's not what I want. Click on it. And I get a list of different things I can do with this. So I'm going to go to value field settings. Get used to it. This is something that you're going to use very, very, very frequently. Excuse me. Sorry, Ryan. So go to value field settings. And I don't know if you can read this. It's a very tiny thing on my screen. And it says summarize values by sum. I don't want that. I want the average salary. And I'm going to format it. I can format my numbers. And I'm going to do that today. So this is currency. It's dollars, right? I don't need decimals. The numbers are big enough already. So let me click on that. So that's going to format the numbers. And this is going to put it as averages. And there's my data. I could probably make this a little bigger so you can see it better. So that becomes my summary. And I've got all the averages. So I've got averages for male, female, ones I don't know, for art students, for business students, engineering, the types of things we were able to do in the total row, where I was able to pull up average. But then if I want to know female arts, I had to filter on arts, then I had to filter on gender. I don't need to do that. I can kind of summarize it all in one table and not have to do it one by one. So that alone has made things a lot simpler for me for doing my analysis here. That the but some of these ones I really don't want in here. Like I don't need other, don't need not applicable. They're clutter. I'm going to get rid of gender. So I go up here to column labels and a down arrow, and I can go and take out female, or the blanks, should I say. Take it out. I can also have done that over here where there's an arrow. No, sorry, I've got to do it up in here. See where it says gender here? It has a funnel with an arrow. And see, I could do the filtering there. So now I've simplified it down. And it makes it a little easier to see this and do my comparisons. And the one thing that I see jumping out at me is this figure, $350,000 for female engineers. I know businesses would like more women in engineering, but do the women in engineering expect that they're actually going to pay them that much money? Okay, let's see what's going on here. I could look at the data that is there, but if you recall at the end of last class, one of the things that I raised was each of these things are estimates. They're based upon the average for a certain number of students or whatever. And that maybe the sample I've got is really small. And that's what's distorting figures. Big samples, I can measure things accurately, but small samples, I can't. So go up to salary again. I can grab it twice. So I've got it down here. Now it's giving me sum again. I'm going to go change sum, value field settings, going over to count, change the count. Okay. Now you can't see everything all the way across, but you can see here that in salary for engineering, these are females, there's only 2, and for males, there's only 8. But for the others, I've got like 100 or 50 or something. I really don't have many engineering students. So I've got 2 options available to me. I could go and say, fine, I'm going to throw out the engineers. They don't belong here. But St. Mary's Engineering is really a 2-year science program. So maybe they're sort of similar. Why don't I take these 2? I'll grab them together. And so I've highlighted both. I'm going to right click it. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say group. So this is what happens. It creates an arts group, a business group, and a group 1. And the group 1 has engineering and science. I can collapse the groups. There's a little minus sign. Collapse the arts, collapse the business, collapse the science and engineering. Group 1 is not a really descriptive label. I can actually just go and type on it and say it's science plus engineering. And that simplifies things for me. Now I've got groups that, I've got a reasonable size sample size here. So this makes it easier then for me, or at this stage, I think this is probably a more reliable figure than what I had previously. So I'm going to throw the counts out. I don't need that now. So I'll throw things in, throw them out. Now I've got a nice small table, and it may make it easier for me to do those sorts of comparisons that I'd had previously. Okay, so the grouping is a nice tool for me. But I should make a note though. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this now or later. We have some here that have that 350 bothers me still, even though I've grouped it in there. And it's because we knew before that some of the salaries figures were crazy numbers. So what I could do is grab salary one more time and draw it into filters. When I do that, it shows up over here. Okay, you see it in the top corner. And I can go and click down, and it gives me a list of all the different salary figures. I can select multiple items, and I'm going to get rid of the ones I don't like. I'm going to look at the ones under 20,000. Let's see. At 20,000, even at minimum wage, you'd earn more than 20,000. And I'm going to throw out these crazy numbers at the top, and I'll throw out the blanks. Blanks shouldn't be causing me problems, not like they are in your histogram in the assignment. I'll get rid of those. There we go. So now I've cleaned out the garbage. I'm now looking at males versus females and looking at it by program. it looks like males in arts expect to earn about $3,000 than females, that males in business expect to earn about $4,000 more than females, and in science, it's close to $5,000 more than females. So I've got a real pattern here between males and females that, um, regardless of what program they're in, males seem to be expecting to earn a lot more than females. This is surprising. I wouldn't have thought this pattern would have emerged. I know that's what they see in the workplace, but it's not necessarily what expected to see among students. But uh, what do I know? That I'm gonna go and change and give you a different variable to look at. We throw these ones out, and one of the things, it's one of the variables I wanted us to include. It's because in some studies on um, who goes to college, who goes to university, issues of access, and many of you may think that it's tuition is the biggest driver of access, and it's not. It's what the parent's education is. If your parents didn't complete anything more than high school, uh, generally high school grads, if their parents didn't go to university, their children don't go to university. They, if they go to anywhere, it's to community college. And if we look at uh, grade 12 students, that where do they go if their parents, at least one of them went to university? Predominantly, they go to university. So the parents' education is the biggest driver of who goes to college versus who goes to university. And the participation rates still in any post-secondary, that again, it's the higher the education level is of the parent, the more likely they'll go on to at least college or university. Um, it Access is uh, not so much driven by the dollars of tuition, but education level of parents. And um, it's something that you may want to use. It's also a good proxy for the socioeconomic class of the family. It isn't perfect, but it gives you an approximation. So I've dragged in parental education, and I've got all of these sorts of things here, what the averages are, that um, the not sure, don't know, I'm just going to throw those out right to the start. I don't know what to do with that. And the not applicable, I'm not going to use because I just don't know what to do with them. There we go. It's fairly busy in terms of what's here. And the numbers all look somewhat similar. Uh, but we noted before with engineering, we got strange results because of small sample sizes. So let's just go and check on those again. I'm going to have to change my summary count. So how many values do I have here? Oh, I've got a problem. For doctorate, we don't have that many students whose parents have a doctoral degree. Um, and even professional degrees like law or medicine, again, there's not that many that are in that category. We've got quite a few that have master's degrees. So although the numbers look similar, and they aren't that far off from others, I would be inclined to merge these together. And I will take, I'm not going to throw out doctorate and professional. I'll merge them with masters. And I'm going to call this a new category, say advanced degrees or graduate degrees, give it a name. So click on this one and masters and professional, and I'm going to right click. So when I was selecting those, let me go back here. I selected it and then I pressed control, not shift. So I could pick them individually. So control and then click on each one. And Then I'm going to go and hit group, and it does groups like I had before. I'm going to collapse these ones. There we go. And what did I call it in yours? I think I called it graduate degrees. Let's call this graduate degrees. Okay. And now my groups are reasonable size. So I'm going to throw this out because it's clutter. And there's my summary. So I'm comparing bachelor's, college, graduate, high school, and how do they compare males versus females? Still a good sized gap between the two, except for maybe college. But this is a different variable than we had before. This is an ordinal variable that a high school education is less than a college education is less than a bachelor's degree that's less than a graduate degree. So we can change the order here. Excel is sequenced these alphabetically, B, C, G, H. So let's move them around. Let's move high school. So click on high school, right click, and go down here to move. And I'm going to move it to the beginning. See, it popped up there to the start. And I'm going to move college up, click on it, click on move, and I'll just move it up one space. So I can move things up and down one space, or I can move them to the beginning, or I can move them to the end. There we go. Now I go, as education level increases, that what do salary expectations do? And it's interesting here. Look at, for females, it really doesn't change things. I know this one's a little bit higher, but maybe that's just a sample size issue. And here they sort of go up and down, up and down. It doesn't, yeah, males still expect to earn more than females, but what they expect to earn has nothing to do with their parents' education, which would also be a proxy for probably their parents' income. So students from wealthy families don't expect to earn significantly different um, salaries at graduation than those from from more modest incomes, which is interesting to look at. Um, that's different from the US, um, where there's some data anyway for those that go to elite colleges. Those that go to elite colleges come from wealthy parents. Admission is based more upon your parents than it is upon your what your how smart you are. Sort of what we've heard in the scandals about admission policies. Whoops. Notice if I go outside my pivot table, suddenly everything disappears. This list of stuff here only appears when I'm in the pivot table and when I've got these things clicked over here as to what I'm showing. Okay, let me go back to my slides and make sure I'm covering everything I should be. So we looked at program, we added gender, we summarized things in terms of the sum of, which was what we didn't want it. So we went back to value field settings. We changed that to average. We changed it to dollars without decimals. We got a nicer table. Then we took out some of the labels we didn't want. And then we also filtered to get rid of the salaries we didn't want. And we combined, we looked at engineering and science. I made mention about sample sizes. We picked that up earlier than this, and we saw how small the sample sizes were. These are numbers that are slightly different from what I had on previously because I did things in a different order. And then we did the grouping, and we simplified it, and we got this, and then we got rid of counts. And then this is what we just looked at. And we did these, and we fixed things up. Okay, and we got this. So that's sort of where we are at the moment. But what I'd like to point out is something that you may not have noticed, that I mention it here in words, but let me go back to Excel. So in this one, you know that we've taken out certain row labels. Okay, we took out not sure and not applicable. Okay, and under gender, we took out the blanks. So we've done some filtering. That shows up with a little funnel with a dot here on these two. With salary, we also took out some values. Recall, we took out ones that were at the very top and the very bottom. What you might not realize is that there's a couple other filters in here as well. So, if you look over here, it's telling me there is a filter. That's what this funnel is on salary, a filter on gender. But it's showing me I've got one on parental education. Click on the down arrow that's over here on the right. Remember we took out not sure, don't know, not applicable? Well, that filter is still in effect. And if I look up here at program, if you recall, we took out other and not applicable. Those filters are still in effect. So you've got to be careful if you don't want them to keep running. If we want to look at everybody and I don't care about programs, I have to go and put these back in again. It'll change my numbers ever so slightly. And with parental education, if I want to include all of them, select get all of them, and it may have made very tiny changes in my answers. Okay, but oh, sorry, no, I wanted that one in. Yeah, it shouldn't change things. It's what was it? What did I have in here that I think I've taken all my filters out? I've got the one on salary. I've got the one on gender. Okay, parental, but program is now, which is one of my filters. I've cleaned that up. Be careful. You will have unintended filters. If you're going and examining your data and flipping it around and looking for patterns over and over again, you're going to be going back and forth, filtering, not filtering. But some of them, the simple ones that you're doing by looking at what rows you have and what columns you have, and these simple filters here get recorded here and they get kept there. But it looks like the only filter I've got is on salary, and that's not the case. So be careful. It's dangerous. Um, we've got to watch out for what we're doing. So be careful about interpreting these numbers because these are only estimates, and if they're small samples, your estimates might be poor. Generally, only look for really big differences. So big patterns that jump out at you. Um, and as I said, watch out for these unintended filters. Let me look at something else here. I want to pick another ordinal variable, and I'm going to look at year. So this is year is how many years these students were at St. Mary's. These were in their first year at St. Mary's, second, third, and fourth year. I know there's some problems with year um, because a student may be in their first year, but they're a transfer student, and really they're in the second or third year of their program. But with this, I might be interested in looking at this thing and seeing, are the expectations all that different between first year students and graduating students? Are those differences the same for males versus females? And that when looking at these tables, sometimes are not, don't, they're not the best way to communicate things. These numbers all look sort of similar. Oh, there's a big gap, and there's some gaps there, and what's the pattern over here? I'm looking at patterns going left to right and top to bottom. What you might want to do is, if you're in the Analyze tab, you should be for a pivot table. If not, click on Analyze. Look over here and it says Pivot Chart. And we're going to use this a lot in the next class, but we'll look at it just briefly today. Click on it. It suggests to take your table and make it into a clustered column chart. A column chart is one, it's like a histogram where we've got vertical bars. But because I've got bars for different groups at the same time, we call it clustered. I'll click OK. And generally, this is the preferred chart with a pivot table. So I'm going to have to make things a little, let me hide this for now so I can show both of these easily on screen. What you will see in your chart is each of the rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, become the labels across the row, bottom row here. Okay? It's really my column labels or for these things. So this is first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And the categories I've got across here become the clusters I've got, male versus female, female versus male, female versus male, female versus male. And the height of the chart is the bars, the columns, are going to be these numbers here. That whereas these ones have all kinds of detail, 51733, and you get distracted by that, the minutiae of it, and this one is 6785, and you may be trying to think of some arithmetic in your head. Looking at bars like this sees, okay, males expect to earn a lot more than females among first-year students. And among second year and third year, they're about the same, but we're back to it again in fourth year. That if I'm just doing quick comparisons and I'm not concerned about precision of numbers, those bars do a very good job of showing that. If I wanted to look just at what's happening with males, very high expectations first year, it goes down and then it picks up a little bit. There's a little bit of movement that is maybe just because my estimates are not perfect. Don't read too much into small changes. But from first year to fourth year, it looks like there's been a fairly significant change. So males coming in first year seem to have unrealistically high expectations. Women also in their first year seem to have higher expectations than in their final year. That may be significant. That as they get closer to graduating and they're starting to explore the job market, they have a better idea of what pay really looks like. That looking at patterns in charts often is much preferred to looking at patterns in tables. When you're communicating information to an audience, and again, I mentioned at the start, an audience that may not be highly educated in terms of data, many audiences would prefer this chart to the table that I've got here. And the chart I can go and format in different ways. That there's, I can add elements into my chart. I can change things around. That I could put a title in here. Probably if I do design here, I could add a chart element, and I could put a chart title up above, and I could, call this salary expectations. And this one I have labeled here as year, but I could go and put it down here and explain what I mean by first, second, third, or fourth year. So that's attractive. Notice here as well, I've got for each of these little down arrows, if I wanted to include those that didn't have a gender, I could bring that back in again, those blanks. So just like the arrows that are over here for column and row labels, I've got them again here. And if there's a funnel, it means I haven't included all of them. Notice the funnel disappeared here because now I've included all of the different genders. That similarly up here. Even here with salary, I could probably right click and change value field settings and come up with a different summary if I wanted to summarize things differently. So there's a lot of different things that I can do here. If I go back to my table and, excuse me, I need go to back to analyze, and I need my field list again here. Suppose I take year out and I put parent education back in again, and you'll see that when I change my table, I changed again all of this stuff. And any changes I make in the table show up in my chart. That I can go back and do my grouping. I took the filter off of this that I had before, so I can put that back on again. I can go and do the grouping that I had before. Group. And you're going to see it gets messy in here. So you should collapse that group. Let's call it again graduate. There we go. So, and I'll get rid of my blanks that I had here. So the table I had previously that looked at parental education and the difference between males and females, now I've got it showing in this fashion across in a chart. And I can do all kinds of different sorts of charts, and we'll be looking at that a fair bit more in the next class. But I'm going to stop here in terms of giving you new stuff. Let me double check to make sure I've done my slides. So again, watch out for our formatting. And we just did that one by year of study. And I've got typos here. My letter H is missing again. And we'll look at those charts a lot more next class. So we've gone through how to make a pivot table, how to select the rows and columns for your table, choosing and formatting, some of the different summary measures, filtering, deleting, hiding, grouping, reordering, trying to make your table a better communication device, and charts are an even better communication device. And warnings about those summary measures, check to make sure you haven't subdivided things and got really tiny samples that you've got. You may have to cluster groups. That watch out about having hidden things when you are doing some of your filtering. And next time, we're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to do histograms all over again in a very quick, easy fashion. And we're going to do some more on how to do categorical variables. I'm going to focus more on frequency counts. And we're also going to do more on pivot charts. So quite a range of different things. It's a short class, 45 minutes. Okay, good. You'd probably prefer that, but there's a lot in it. Since you've got extra time, I'd recommend that you go and bring up a table chart, given the stuff that you've got for your assignment. Make it into a pivot table and see what you can do with it and see what types of summaries you can start building. Try to repeat some of the things that we've done today, or at least repeat the exercises we've done today. If you don't want to watch the whole video, I'll soon be posting a shorter one that just zips through the Excel bit, and I'll post it inside of chapter 4. But I've got to edit it a little bit first. You take care, and we will, it's today, Wednesday. I guess you won't see me until next week. Have a good weekend. Hopefully it's less foggy and a little less humid. You take care. Bye now.